Well, good afternoon YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Dan. I'm woodturning in Wales, based in the UK. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to jump on today is because I wanted to just bust some of those myths out there, some of the do's and don'ts, and yes and no's, and some of the things that woodturners don't often explain about woodturning. Now, when woodturning, basically, a lot of people don't talk about the expense, basically, expense that goes into actually owning a lathe and the tools and the other types of equipment you need, basically, when jumping into this type of skill. Now, when you're going out there, basically, and you want to try and get into woodturning, try and join a forum, basically, and go out there and try and speak to some experienced woodturners, whether or not that's joining a forum or getting onto YouTube and watching various other woodturners explain and try and talk about their craft and their technique, tool placement, and talk about different kind of lathes out there. Now, if you've got a registered personal tutor in your local area, I suggest wholeheartedly going to speak to a registered personal tutor, and they can talk about the things like the lathe they're using, what kind of things they turn, basically, but not that's bowls or platters or pens or epoxy, etc. Now, I know a lot of woodturners out there basically started from scratch, just like I did, basically. And what I wanted to do is just go out there and explain basically some of the experience that I've picked up over the years of woodturning. Now, a lot of people go out there and basically go and buy their first ever lathe. And the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what kind of budget have I got, really? How much do I want to spend on a lathe? Now, there are lathes out there that you can pick up for second hand, etc., from Facebook Marketplace, from eBay, etc. But before digging deep into your pockets, basically, what you want to do is do your research, okay? There are so many competitors out there, and it's not just going out and buying a lathe, okay? Because you've got to take into consideration about your PPE, okay? The tools you'd like to use, things like your air filtration system, etc., and dust extraction. Because these are some of the risks that basically become involved when woodturning. Because the last thing you want to do is be breathing in dust, okay? So when you're going out there and you're looking at buying your first lathe, jump around, ask questions, okay? Go and speak to a tutor, okay? There's so many things you need to take into consideration when buying your first lathe. Ask yourself, what do I want to turn? Do I want to turn small decorative items like pens, etc., small vases, bowls, platters? There's so many things that you put on a lathe and turn from just a piece of timber. So basically go out there and say, ask some questions, get a lesson if need be. But again, there are so many things to consider before jumping onto a lathe, okay? You've got to remember, this is a very particular skill and it takes practice, lots and lots of practice. And you have to be committed to wanting to learn and know more about this industry. Now, I've seen people go out there and they've bought their first lathe and they've spent £200 on the lathe, and they go home all excited, and basically they'll go to their shed or go to their workshop and they'll bolt the lathe down and they'll jump straight onto the lathe. They'll put the piece of timber onto the headstock. They'll start the lathe off and they'll go to start making cuts, and all of a sudden the lathe will just stop. And why does it stop? It's because the lathe, well, the motor inside the lathe, the headstock, basically it contains the motor. So basically what we want to do is make sure that that power in that lathe is adequate for what we want to turn, okay? And a lot of people who see their lathe stop is because it's underpowered, okay? Yes, it's got the capacity to spin the wood, but does it have the capacity to spin the wood and cut it at the same time? Some of the cheaper lathes out there, they're not worth the paper it's printed on, basically. So it's, always go out there, do your research, okay? It's, but you've got to remember, there's quite a lot of other equipment you're going to need other than just a lathe. So go out there, think about that budget that you've got in your pockets and how much you want to spend to get into this industry. Now, the second thing I'd like to talk about is maintenance, okay? And with every piece of equipment, it always has to be maintained, okay? And what do I mean by maintaining it? Well, before you even think about coming onto the lathe, always make sure you check your bolts, okay? The bolts that actually bolt the lathe down, whether or not it's on legs. Always check the screws and the bolts, basically, which are holding the lathe together. The last thing you want to do is basically jump onto the lathe without checking. As you can say, it's always good practice to go around the lathe and make sure everything's tight, it's secure, and it's locked. Because you have to remember, this is a type of piece of machinery, okay? And it will cause you significant injury if you don't take care of the lathe, also taking care of yourself, okay? So go around, double and triple check, everything is tight and secure. The next thing I want to talk about maintenance wise is always clean down your workspace. Always make sure that basically after you finish turning one particular project is to clean up, okay? The last thing you want to do is leave sawdust all over your lathe, and because in some types of wood, there are certain types of tannins, and especially green wood, it's very wet. And basically what you don't want to do is leave it all over your lathe, and what will happen is the lathe will become rusty. And the problems with your lathe being rusty, you're going to have issues trying to move the tailstock up and down the bed of your lathe. So basically there are ways and means of cleaning your lathe, but we'll get into that into another video. But again, always make sure you clean your workspace, okay? It's good safety practice, okay? Clean the floor, clean the lathe, and brush everything off, basically. The last thing I want to see anybody doing is getting into wood turning and causing themselves significant injury. So again, maintain your lathe, make sure everything's tight, make sure everything's locked, and basically think about kind of your own safety before turning the thing on. The last thing I've seen is basically, I used to do it, and I think many other turners have, is they leave the chuck key in the chuck. Always take that chuck key out of the chuck when not using it, because some numpty will come along and they'll say, oh, what does this button do? And they can start the lathe, and if that chuck is still, well, chuck key is still in the chuck, you've got to remember this thing is spinning towards me, okay? It's spinning right towards me. So if that chuck key is still in there, it can get thrown out. And I've seen lots of videos on YouTube where people have been hurt, significantly hurt, by not following standard practice, basically. So always maintain your lathe and think about your own safety. Now, if you're still with me, basically, what I'd like to talk about next is about learning, okay? Learning about this craft, this type of skill. And it does take lots and lots of practice to become very good at wood turning. Now, I think even the most experienced turners still often make mistakes. Even myself, I still often make mistakes. But again, we always learn. As they say, there's always a school day when working on a lathe, okay? Whether or not that's working with a different type of timber, etc. So always go out there and basically trying to learn as much as possible. Practice all the time, okay? But again, the next thing I want to move on to basically is tools, okay? Your tools are just as important as your lathe. And what do I mean by that? Now, here, you've seen me using them in my previous video, are two of my favourite bowl gougers, okay? And one is the 1/2 inch, one is the 3/8. As I say, the profile is exactly the same like I explained before, but one thing you need to consider when possibly using any type of tool is to make sure it's incredibly sharp, okay? You can say, and I've got a sharpening system here. It's called Robert Sorby Pro Edge, okay? And this is my glorified belt sander, as they like to call it. And again, I would never think about turning my lathe on or trying to do any kind of turning with blunt tools. And why? Well, one, the risk of basically you're not going to cut anything, because what it's going to do is you're going to have the timber spinning and it's not going to cut, it's going to bounce, okay? And basically you're not going to cut, okay? Like I said, it bounces off the timber. And again, I think about sharpening every 20 minutes, okay? Every 20 minutes to ensure your gougers, well, especially gougers, you can buy carbide, which are just as sharp as traditional tools. But again, always make sure that you're using sharp tools, because it is very, very dangerous to use dull tools when wood turning. Now, like with any kind of machinery, basically, there are always risks and dangers involved, basically, when doing anything with machinery, okay? Now, the last thing you want to do is basically have any kind of jewellery on, long flowing sleeves, and say if you've got long hair, tie it back, okay? You don't want anything getting caught in anything moving, okay? Because at the end of the day, I've said it before and I'll say it again, a lathe can and will hurt you, and it will cause significant injury if you don't take care of yourself, okay? I'm going to say it's, like I said, I don't wear any jewellery when I'm wood turning, because it could take something so small really, and yeah, you could break your fingers, you could break your hands, and yeah, I was going to say, so always make sure basically what I'm wearing here is a wood turner smock, okay, S-M-O-C-K, and as you can see, there are no pockets in the front, okay? And why there are no pockets in the front? Because if I'm here messing around with my pockets and I pull my hand out and there's a piece of timber spinning on here, I could quite easily hit that. So where the pockets do sit is on the back. So you're not fumbling around in front of a spinning piece of timber, okay? They're always in the back, okay? So I wear this basically, so it's got nice short sleeves, and again, nothing is hanging or can get caught in any of the moving components, especially the chuck. Now, a lot of lathes, when you go out there, like I said, they're all standard. You said they all come with their headstock, their tailstock. But the thing is, you won't get a chuck, okay? You will not get a chuck, not unless you buy your lathe second hand, like somebody's giving away their whole kit, etc. But what you will get is a live centre and a drive centre. So basically, you can work between two centres, okay? Now, chucks come in various different sizes, depending on what you're trying to turn. This is an SC3 chuck from Record Power, and we can go up to SC4 and we get much bigger jaws for much bigger pieces, okay? So again, you're not just talking about your lathe, okay? You're thinking about your chuck, your tools, your air filtration system, your dust extraction system, okay? Instead, the last thing, there are particular types of timber out there, like yew, okay, and laburnum, okay? These types of woods have poisonous properties to them. So the last thing you want to do is be breathing any of that in, okay? Especially with laburnum, you can breathe some of those fibres in and it can cause headaches, etc. So again, always make sure you've got dust mask, and face shield, okay? And you've got various things, so plenty of air ventilation when you're wood turning, okay? Because there's lots of dust and lots of sawdust involved. So always make sure basically that it's a well ventilated area and you've got plenty of room to move around, okay? Make sure the level that your lathe is on is nice and secure, it's nice and flat, because you don't want an uneven surface, because again, the lathe will move, it'll wobble around, okay? Like I said before, every lathe has a capacity, okay? Now, as you can see in the background here, I've got my small mini Axminster lathe, okay? It's only a small mini lathe. Now, this is one of the lathes I first started on, okay? And this is great for things like pens, wands, nothing, I can't get anything too big on the lathe, but again, due to the capacity, due to the width over the bed. So again, I moved up to the Coronet Herald so I could have a bigger capacity to turn bigger bowls, etc. So again, when you're going out there, like I said, mini lathes are great to start on, okay? Midi lathes is what the Coronet Herald is, and then we can go up from there. There's so many competitors out there basically when you're going out to buy your lathe. We've got one-way lathes, we've got Laguna lathes, we've got jet lathes, okay? And they go up from there, and they increase in power with the bigger the lathe, sorry. But if you enjoy my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to say I'm trying to pass on as much experience and as much knowledge as I can really to help people get into this industry. Like I said in one of my previous videos, I became overwhelmed with so much information about what tools do I need, what else do I need apart from the lathe, and saying this is information I picked up over the last couple of years of wood turning. So again, go out there and do your homework. I was going to say, wood turning is a great skill to have. It's a great skill, but again, always make sure that you do your research, you practice lots, and you become very, very good at it. And say there's so many things that I've learned over the last 18 months to 2 years with wood turning, and not a day goes by that I don't learn something different. So again, it's going on there. There's so many things that I've learned in the past with certain types of timber. Now there are particular woods out there I wouldn't particularly turn on my lathe, willow being one of them. I have turned willow, and willow has a tendency to hold lots of moisture, pockets of moisture basically, and it has a very, very distinctive smell. It smells a bit like cat pee. It smells like cat pee, and again, it takes a long time for wood to dry out. So if you're using fresh wood, is what we call green wood, and say that wood has been felled recently, again, it's gonna hold lots of moisture. So if you put a piece of timber on the lathe and you're turning it green, I was going to say expect the bowl to warp and crack. Okay, and why does it warp and crack? One is because it's the moisture trying to escape from the wood basically. You can go out there and you can buy bowl blanks, which I find particularly expensive. So if you're going to go out there and you want to buy bowl blanks, and again, you've got to have very deep pockets, because they are not cheap. Just like anything else when wood turning, everything comes at a price and a cost. Would I go out there and buy cheap tools? Personally not. I was going to say one gouge. This gouge is come from Axminster. It's a crown 1/2-inch bowl gouge. It cost me around about £70. Now you're probably asking yourselves, why don't I go out there and buy myself a kit off eBay where I get 5 in a pack for £35? Well, you pay for what you get with wood turning, okay? You buy cheap, you buy twice. And again, this is a full tang, so basically the flute, the metal part of the bowl gouge, this is the flute, and again, what they class on the end is a profile, okay? And every bowl gouge will have a different profile on it. Yes, we can reshape and resharpen and change the profile using a sharpening system, but again, I wouldn't go out there and buy a selection of tools, not for a very cheap price anyway, because it's probably got very poor steel. But the next thing I want to jump into is expect challenges and expect changes when you're wood turning, okay? And what kind of challenges are they? Well, different things like wood, so things like hardwoods, oak, ash, beech, etc. They're very, very hard woods, and they blunt your tools very, very quickly. Now, there's things like pine, which is very, very soft, and again, we can have often things like tear out, which is a bit of a pain to get rid of. But I'll get into that into another video. But again, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to drop me a follow, drop me a subscribe, and I'll try and help out as many people as I can. I think I set the account up not very long ago, and I'm up to 28 subscribers. So I'm getting there slowly. You can say I haven't posted very much content at the moment, but again, it's a learning process for me on YouTube as well. But I hope this content is kind of helpful. I was going to say, but yeah, stick around. Now, the last thing I wanted to cover, basically, if you're still with me, is the different types of wood we turn. And I'm not talking about wood as in the wood types, as in oak and elm and ash and beech, etc. I'm talking about end grain and side grain. Now, this is one of the first lessons, one of the biggest lessons I learned when I first started wood turning. Now, what is side grain and what is end grain? Okay, side grain is half a log. Okay, it's half a log. Okay, you can imagine there was another half of this log. But what I've done basically, I've removed the pith out of the log basically. And what is the pith? It's the heart, it's the core, it's the softest part of the log basically. And if we leave the pith in, the likelihood of your bowl cracking is very likely. And why is that? It's because it's moisture trying to escape from the log. And a lot of it sits in the softest part of the log basically, which is the center. So when we're wood turning, okay, we tend to get our faceplate and we'll put it basically direct, dead center into the side of the log, and we mount that to the lathe basically. And if it's not dead center, then we end up with an uneven bowl. And what do I mean by an uneven bowl? Well, you'll look at the rim on a bowl, and it should be all the same diameter. If the faceplate is not dead center, then basically we end up with a rim which starts off fat, and as we turn it into the bowl, it'll go from fat to very, very thin. Okay, so and that's why we need to ensure that the faceplate is dead center when mounting our side grain. I always turn side grain. I don't tend to turn much end grain. Now, what is end grain? Now, end grain, you can imagine this, right? And a nice big long log, okay? And I'm chopping it into sections, cookies is what they call it, with my chainsaw. I get it back and I put it on the lathe. And I could quite easily just, it's already round, okay? It's already round. So all I'd have to do is start hollowing it out. But as you can see from this piece, it's already cracking, okay? And it's cracking straight down, straight to the center, where the heart of the core of the log is, where that pith is. That's why it's imperative to remove that pith, okay? Because if you could quite easily turn a bowl of end grain and put it to the side and look at it a week or two later, and I guarantee you, if it's green, it's going to kind of crack right down the side of it, okay? So again, I always ensure to turn side grain just to prevent any more cracking, etc. Always remove the pith, it's imperative. But anyway, I hope that's been to some use and some help. Like I said, my name's Dan, and this is a brand new YouTube channel based on my wood turning experience. If you'd like to learn more or know more, I say I have put up a very beginner intro, if that's one way to put it. I've done a couple of videos on wood turning, but I hope that's been helpful. And any more questions, I'd love to hear from you all. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully I shall see you in the next one. Take care.